So if you guys have questions for who's listening or whatnot, just send your questions in throughout it or whatever, but I just don't want to be bombarded with questions while we're going through the whole thing. So if you have anything like that, if we don't get to a Q&A, I don't know if we will tonight. I'm just going to go through about 20 minutes or so of some human performance technique and tactics that we talk about and we work on. And then if you have questions, send them. And then after this, later tonight, I'll sit down and I'll try to get back to you guys individually. To my knowledge, I have no one over here. This is getting saved. Okay, cool. So if it needs to be saved or anyone wants a link to that, we can do that as well. But so I'm just going to get into it. So first of all, we got numerous people in here, so this is really cool. So I want to say thank you first of all, and I'll get to see who's listening after this. And I'm excited to sort of dive into that. I appreciate you guys giving me a little bit of your evening. What's today? Tuesday? Today, pretty much everyone nowadays doesn't know what day it is. So Tuesday evening, for us in the Central Time Zone, it's 7 p.m. I'm going to try to get this done before the sun sets. That's a huge priority of mine. And then for guys who are out on East Coast, if the sun has already set, just enjoy a relaxing evening and try to pick up some things that we teach and some of the things that we share with our individual athletes, and then we also share with organizations, right? And so before I get going, if you guys have anything to write with, pen, paper, or if you want to use your phones, you can do that as well. But I would look at that as something you can start taking notes, because I'm actually going to dive into the importance of that. And I'm going to touch on one pillar tonight. So I'm going to take you through one pillar that I work on with individual athletes, and then, like I said, as a consulting with an organization, a group of people, and even with myself, right? And so the way that I want this to be, these Zooms, this is the first one. We'll get into the depths of this over the next couple of weeks, especially with the things that are going on around the world. So I hope everyone is peaceful this evening and is able to find some time to relax. And I want this setting, I mean, I got my tea with me. I want this setting to be really relaxing, right? And I'm just going to find time and express to you guys what I study, what I find, what we find with high performers. I'm going to sort of tie that into some content and then share with you guys, and hopefully it adds value in any spectrum of your life, right? I was on a conference call earlier today with a mom, a dad, a nutritionist, and then myself, and then I also worked with a business consultant out west, and then a professional athlete, and then my general friends, right? And the thing that I talked to on the conference call and then the call with the person out west is that everything in performance hits every spectrum, right? And so some people might be on this, looking at this in baseball, football, hockey, specifically sports. I'm not necessarily talking directly to an athlete. Okay, it's something that I've noticed over the last couple of years, that we look at performance as something that's only utilized when we're performing. And I'll talk heavily about that over the next couple of weeks. But what we teach, and what I teach specifically, is that everything you do in a 24-hour period should be seen as a performance. And what I mean by that, not negatively thinking about you're putting on a show, but you are wearing a mask, right? So wherever you're at in the country right now, whether you're alone, with a loved one, with a family, and you're listening to me, okay, we are acting a certain way at every point of the day, and we're performing at that. So if you're a father, when you're at work, you're different than when you're with your family, and when you're alone, and when you're with your buddies, and that's not a bad thing. The objective is to take very concrete things with us into all of these layers and scenes of life and execute them. And so that's what fuels me up, right? And so I hope that I'm able to tie in what I learn and what I've sort of seen and established, and give that gift to you, right? If you guys are familiar with Yale, Yale just released a free class. I think it's the Science of Well-Being. I should know that because I just enrolled in it. But all the Ivy League schools are actually releasing free classes right now. And in the Yale class in the week one, the professor had a really fascinating point. She talked about the GI Joe fallacy, which is tremendous. And I've been talking on this concept for the last couple months to organizations. And I'm going to hit on that right now. And then we're going to get into this subject. So the GI Joe fallacy, the way they described it, is basically a person speaking on happiness isn't necessarily happy, right? A person who speaks about leadership isn't necessarily has it figured out, right? The coach or the teacher speaking on math, biology, whatever it is, doesn't necessarily know everything about math or biology. And that's really important. And I say that a lot when I speak in environments, that the stuff that I share with you, I also too need to practice. So we'll finish tonight with a breath practice. I did a breath practice right before I came on. And it's not something that I've mastered. I haven't just all of a sudden become a great breather. I'm not on a dime extremely still. I don't get away from worries. I don't get out of anxieties. I need to practice these sort of things. And so same thing of the content that I have. This is coming from a position of what I've gathered, but it's going to hit all of you individually and differently, right? So in the Yale, they coined it as the G.I. Joe fallacy. The way I've always looked at it is that when we're listening to people speak, that gift that they're giving to you is that person's also trying to do. So what I'm going to talk on, and a lot of my philosophy on how I coach, is most of the time it's stuff that I'm personally trying to practice and improve on. And I think that that'll be really valuable for you guys today and over the next couple of weeks to think about it in that perspective, right? And so to dive into that deeper, I want you guys, if you have a pen or paper, anything to jot notes on as we get into this now, I want you to write the question that I've currently been pondering, okay? And I hope you guys can see it on this. I got some stuff on the bottom I'll lift up, but okay, the question that I've been asking myself and asking a lot of people that I work with right now is, how do you learn how to learn? Okay, so I'll give a second for you to write that down. How do you learn how to learn? Okay, and it's a question that I think is not surface level at all, because learning is a skill and it's an art. And from the genre of people, young, middle, older, okay, if you ask the same question to a different generation, I urge you to do that and listen to the answer, right? Listen to the tone, pay attention to the facial features, pay attention to how they try to teach you, or maybe they ask you a question back. But think on that for a second. How do you learn how to learn? And so often when we perceive content, when we are put in front of things, it doesn't mean that we know the tool. It doesn't mean that we comprehend the knowledge. It doesn't mean that I have your wisdom. And so you need to meditate on that. You need to think deep on, how do you learn how to learn, right? Is it experience-based? Is it educational-based? Is it reading-based? Is it conversational-based? Okay, and that's very, very crucial. And we learn that at a young age. But I think to just simplify learning in itself is a very intriguing thing. And I would write this down if you have the option. Okay, learning breeds growth, right? And growth breeds happiness. So when you look at times right now that are specifically happening around the world, what you're seeing a lot of adapting and adjusting, and that's really cool. It'll be really cool to see a lot of the creations that come out of this. But at the same time, where people are getting caught up and we're running into problems is we're not seeing progress. So we're not going to our job, or we're not going to the gym, or we're not going and doing things outside of our house that is showing us progression. And in any world, any field of performance, you have to set people up to find progression. And this is across the board. I mean, look at any relationship. If the relationship stops to progress, the relationship starts to digress, right? And this happens across any spectrum. So we have to look at, well, what's the root of progression? What's the step before happiness? What's the step before growth? Well, it's learning, right? And now, okay, well then you ask yourself, well, what do I want to learn? Well, if you don't know what you want to learn, think of and write down all the things that you're in front of right now that you ask the most questions to, okay? And if you could think back, I don't know if there's any high school kids or college kids listening, but if you're in college or high school, think of the class that you take, right? The classes that you take that you don't ask questions in is the class that you struggle the most with, you negatively don't want to attend, and yada, yada, yada. The class that you find curiosity and open-minded, willingness to be wrong, the opportunity to want to ask questions, that is typically the path that leads you into passion, which we hear a lot about find your passion, right? Which is great and all, and we'll talk about that in further weeks. But where we miss is that we only think of that in school, right? And so you need to look at yourself right now. What makes you extremely curious right now in your life? And I want you to think on that as I'm speaking. And I'm going to give you something to think on in a second here. But what makes you curious across any spectrum in your life today? What do you ask the most questions about, right? Who are you asking those questions to? Okay, and then what questions do you ask yourself? And at the root of learning is curiosity, and it's question asking. And that alone creates progress. So I want you to ask yourself that question and then ask yourself how you're learning to learn better. Okay, and those are really important things that we see a lot when we're trying to establish some excitement and we're trying to establish some sort of progression, is we got to get to the bottom of curiosity. Okay, so taking that forward, well, Harv, how do I know I'm improving? How do I know I'm asking better questions? How do I know I'm curious? How do we do these things? Okay, well, it's self-awareness first and foremost. So if you're ever understanding what's the first thing that we talk about, what's the first pillar that we talk about inside of performance, it's self-awareness. As you notice here underneath, I put subjective. So what does that mean? Basically, that means that there is no good or bad. Right, so self-awareness is entirely a subjective process, and to simplify that, think of it as a debate, right? Same subject, one person perceives it bad, one person perceives it good. Now we have the opportunity to debate, right? And now take that out of like a debating view, put that into yourself, put that into athletes that you talk to, put that into workers that you train with, CEOs, companies, organizations, meetings, whatever it is. Right? All of us are seeing things through our own lens, our own experiences, which is a perception, right? And that perception is entirely subjective. So whenever we're working with a staff or we're working with a kid, the first thing to do is to, one, from the beholder of this, ask better questions. And I would jot that down. Ask better questions to the people in front of you. Okay, because when I start asking you questions, I'm going to start getting a position of your experiences. I'm going to start seeing the world from your shoes. And if I can see the world from your shoes, your perceptions, now all of a sudden I can actually create blueprints, progress, objective choices out in front of you to help you solve a problem. You know, very often we get into positions where we're a little nervous, a little tight, and we have problems, right? And I give a seminar or summit, I give a speech about problem solving, but problems is inevitable. None of us are going to avoid problems. So when you have problems, when you have people who you're talking to or you're venting, which is fine to a certain degree, basically all those people can do is identify the problem. They can't create the solution for you. And so as coaches, as family members, parents, and all those things above, okay, we have to get very clear and concise with asking better questions. And then ultimately, the people who are not on the end of receiving the question, you need to ask yourself your own questions. Right, and I'll ask you a question at the end of this that I'll leave you guys with for the evening to think on and chew on. But think of the first way to improve self-awareness, the first way to enhance your subjectivity of good or bad is through question asking. Okay, so you need to always be able to sit down, relax, and ask yourself these sort of things. Is that true? How I'm perceiving the world right now, is that true? Right? Is what people think of me, is that true? And the dichotomy of control between that is in or outside of your control. So if you're ever having trouble with what questions do I ask, what questions do I need to ask, well then you simplify it to those two lanes of the road. When you're stuck in subjectivity, when you're stuck in self-awareness, you go, is what I'm thinking about right now in my control or outside of my control? And there's a lot to do with Stoicism and Stoic philosophy on basically just simplifying that process. Outside of your control, nothing. Inside of your control, boom. Okay, now I can ask myself to the level of attitude, effort, physical need, urge of desire that I can sort of get through that. So first and foremost, that's pillar one of MindStrong, right? And as we kind of go down here, is I hope you're taking notes. The reason why we mention that, hopefully I don't give it all away, how do you know? Right? How do you know that over time that self-awareness is increasing? Right? I wrote track information, right? Tracking information. So if you're not on this Zoom taking notes, okay, you're missing out on retention. You're missing out on an ability to learn something. Even if you feel as if you're hearing me speak and you go, okay, I have a great memory, the need to write ended the human need to remember. right? So the second we started writing things down, our brain capacity of memory stopped being used as much, right? This is a great analogy to think of as GPS, right? I was talking to a group of friends earlier today about GPS and maps, right? A couple of years ago, we didn't need a GPS, where now we'd freak out if we don't have a GPS. Well, why is that? 10, 15 years ago, our brain wasn't used to the easy or the comfort of typing in an address and driving to it, where we would just have to figure things out. We would have to track memory. We'd have to ask a question of the road, write those directions down, and we'd have to hold on to them. So through this experience, what I'm about to take you through with the triggers to your brain, I want you to have a position where you're writing down exactly what you're thinking while I speak. Not from the way that I'm speaking, but from the way that you're hearing it. Okay, because I'm going to give us 4 triggers that happen to us that keep us in avoidance and comfort zones. But through that, everyone who's on this Zoom call is going to have a different experience. So there'll be a trigger that you're going to go, yes, or maybe not, or did or didn't hit you. It doesn't matter. You want to track this. You want to write this down so that you have the memories retained on paper. And this will pay dividends long into your performance. But what am I talking about, and where am I going to take us for the topic of tonight? Well, the topic of tonight it's going to be a mental conditioning topic, and it's going to be what we call the negativity bias, right? So I would write that down. I would write down negativity bias. Okay. The negativity bias, and I'll pull this up. But what is that? Why do we have that? The negativity bias is essentially built in our system of survival. So everyone on the screen, everyone that you talk to, has a position of freeze state. It's called sympathetic, right? Fight, freeze, or flight. And for the majority of our life, our entire brain system and chemistry is built to keep us surviving. It's built to keep us safe, right? So when we get anything that triggers that safety mechanism, anything that makes us freak out or nervous, you freeze, right? And you see a lot of that through breath and eyes and some things that we'll touch on. But mentally, that comes down to his position of triggers. And as I touched on just now, self-awareness on this phone or the Zoom session tonight. Is this a phone call? What is it? A phone call, Zoom session, whatever. On this session tonight, what we need to accomplish is we need to become very clear and aware of these 4 triggers, right? And you need to pay attention to how they are making you make choices, which will be the next Zoom that I do on choices. But these 4 triggers are going to put you in positions of avoidance. It's going to put you in positions of comfort zone. So what are they, right? Well, we have 4 of them, okay? And I'm going to touch, I don't want to hold this up the whole time, so I'm going to write this and then I'll hold it up at the end. If anyone needs to take a picture or whatnot, you can do that. But the 4 triggers of our negativity bias, the position of our brain that keeps us still, right? It's what makes us suck. It comes down to 1 is change, okay? So 1 is change, 2 is uncertainty, 3 is attention, and 4 is struggle. Okay, so I'll say those again. Change, uncertainty, attention, and struggle, right? And again, go back to how I touched on the subjectiveness of this. The reason why you need to figure out how you personally learn, the reason why you need to personally jot and track your information so that you can read your own story over and over and over again and pick up on things, is because your brain gets stuck in 2 different positions. Okay, and I would write this down too. Your brain gets stuck in the past or it gets stuck in the future. Very rarely are we present moment living, which is acquired as like a flow state, right? Which everyone always wants to try to get to. We'll touch on that and another one as well. But your brain is doing 2 things. It's in the past, remembering regret and guilt, right? It's what makes you feel guilty about something that happened 3 days ago and you're still thinking about it today. You're still asking the same repetitive question today. It's things that make you regret things. It's things that you regret later in the day that happen in the morning. Okay, your past is always happening. Your mind is always perceiving the past. And it has these experiences that made you have to fight for survival at that time. So now that experience gets locked into what we call the memory library, right? It gets locked into your library. And anytime anything triggers that in the present moment, you go back to the way that you were or felt during that past experience, and that is what is considered a freeze state. So you freeze, right? And this is how we get to positions where we go, okay, next week we're going to get in really good shape. but you have such a deep experience of stopping during those experiences that when it gets to that moment, when it gets to the game time, you freeze, right? And in those positions, you lose self-awareness. You ask poor questions, okay? And then ultimately how I started it, you're not about to make progress, so that you're going to become very negative again, and you're not going to be happy, right? So these are just kind of simple ways. Now look at the future. Well, the future comes in more of like an anxiety type of way. It comes in more of a future fear, if you will, future worry. You see a lot of this with younger kids or college kids or getting recruited to a college. You'll see a lot of people who they get really nervous about, will I get recruited? You see people with promotions. They get so nervous about a promotion that they could get 6 months from now that they now can't execute the job. And this happens over and over and over again, okay? And so we perceive and make up stories in our head of things that could happen in the future so aggressively that we go back into that freeze state or a flight state where we just avoid altogether. Okay, so you jot that down on the side. Your brain is always in the past or in the future. And when we get to those moments, raising levels of awareness, you want to ask yourself the question, when you get to a freeze that you've experienced, okay, what is triggering me? Is that uncertainty that I'm avoiding? Is that change that I'm avoiding? Is this attention or is this struggle? Why am I avoiding it? Ask yourself a question, make a positive decision, positive choice, if you will, and live in a fight zone, a fight sympathetic state, if you will, and then act appropriately. Okay, so let's go through them. The first one I mentioned was change, right? I don't know, which I kind of like the concept of not knowing who's listening, but I don't know who's listening now, but think of it as like relationships, right? When you're in a relationship that you don't know if you want to stay in or not, well, more times than not, it's you're afraid of change. You know this position, you know this category, you know this lifestyle. So to change seems very intimidating. So you'd rather avoid change. It's like right now, as a world, we have to change. We're literally living in an opportunity of change. So we can't avoid that. You cannot be in a comfort zone right now. In fact, all of us on the planet are outside of that. And there's a beautiful thing that happens in that. It's called adaptation, right? And this is why so many people are creating things. I mean, shoot, we're on Zoom now because of this, right? And there's a lot of positives that come with change. So you can't live in a place of avoidance, right? Same thing with uncertainty, uncertain about the future, uncertain about what might happen, uncertain about your job happening, those sort of things. Okay, if you live in avoidance, you're not going to adjust. You're not going to get discomfort, and you're not going to adapt. You're going to, what we say, you're going to put stress on top of stress. Okay, and that's not going to be productive for you. Look at attention. You know, you get a lot of attention. This is how people avoid accountability, avoid work ethic, these sort of things, right? They're afraid of attention being on them. This is how you avoid wanting to be successful. I could be really good at that, but then now people are going to know me, right? And those sort of things are going to put you in a place of avoidance as well. And then finally, struggle. You know, you look at things of struggle and that nature, and life is struggle. It's very simple as that. We're an organism that needs to be stressed. Anything that we stress the organism with, we're going to adapt. So we have to put ourselves in positive struggle, and the only way to sustain struggle is to know why you would do something. You know, positive psychology is broken down into 3 layers: the good life, pleasurable life, good life, and meaningful life. And in terms of all 3 of those, the one that stands out above all 3 is meaning, right? People who show a high level of meaning have a high level of sustainability in their life to keep pursuing things that are hard, right? The good life is sort of like in a mixture. It's a sense of engagement. It's kind of how engaged are you into your work? How engaged are you into this conversation? Those sort of things. And then pleasure is as you know it, right? Cars, houses, those sort of things. And when you have engagement and meaning, that pleasure is sort of the cherry on top, if you will. So I want you to kind of think through those 4 triggers and think through, give yourself your own examples, right? What in your life have you noticed that when I find uncertainty or I face uncertainty, what do I typically do? Okay, and what have I done in the past? When have I froze in the past? When have I sort of fought in the past and moved through that? Okay, and then jot down those situations so you have a memory. Okay, and you can keep reiterating new books in your memory library so you can make better choices. Okay, then look at the change, uncertainty, the attention, the struggle, and those sort of things. And just think about those. Think over those. I'll have it right here if you guys need that. Okay, if you're forgetting those, these are our negativity bias. These are our triggers and our concepts. So that is a breakdown of how we start our first pillar when we work with athletes. Right? Again, we just sort of start by asking questions. I always start by asking questions to people. Very curious, open-ended, no right or wrong. Okay, it's entirely subjective and it's self-awareness. Now, to the biggest computer in the world, your brain, there's triggers of avoidance, right? And you have to ask yourself constantly, what is keeping me in avoidance? What's keeping me in a comfort zone? Well, that happens through attention, struggle, uncertainty, and change. Ask yourself which one of those four really aggressively keeps me from pursuing the things I want to pursue. Okay, and write them down. Write down questions. Write down deep questions. I tweeted out the other day, write as if nobody's watching, because nobody is watching. Okay, so be honest with yourself and get into a position of being a better learner. Okay, great learners are excitable people. They're curious, they're open-minded, and they ask great questions. Okay, so find things that you're curious about. Find things that push you in a position of experience and make you want to go out and try things. And then you'll acquire your own sort of wisdom, which is the byproduct of choice. And again, I've kind of alluded towards that concept. We're going to definitely talk about choice here in the future. But we need to follow those first steps. Okay, so that was my presentation tonight on the mental conditioning aspects. I hope that adds some value to you and gives you some sort of guidance as you move forward. As we sort of finish, I'm going to just take us through a breathing practice, right? And breath is, we'll have a breathing actual Zoom just primarily on breath. And I'll also talk about the physiological triggers of your body, having a lot to do with your breathing and how that tells you how your mind is getting triggered psychologically, which will be really fascinating. You'll kind of hear some things that will be hopefully new and unique or advantageous to you. But that'll be another time as well. For tonight, I know a lot of people have reached out about breathing and things that they can do and things that can help them. You know, breathing is your anchor, right? And it does three things. So if I can guide you on breath, just for some simple terms, breath does three things. It's meditative, it's cellular, so that means it's at a health level, and then it's mechanical, right? And so if we go to tonight, I'm just going to teach you some mechanical stuff that you can take with you. Very simple, and then a meditative breath practice, and then I'll let you guys kind of do that as your homework assignment. And then let us know if you have any feedback or anything that you want us to touch on or anything you want us to talk about in the future. I've never really done this live on a screen, so this was more of a learning experience for me too. So I appreciate you guys being invested and involved. But wherever you're at, sitting, lying, however your evening looks, let's start with breathing 101. Okay, I want you to first and foremost take a deep breath through your mouth. Okay, you can have some sound. Okay, take a deep breath through your nose now. Let's kind of reiterate. Take a deep breath through your nose. Take another one. Okay, and you should notice something. And typically in a room, someone raises their hand right now and tells me what they notice, but I'm going to do that one more time. Take a deep breath through your mouth. Take a deep breath through your nose. Okay, and you should notice in that position that when I take a deep breath through my mouth, something rises. Okay, if you're answering it, your chest rises. Chest rises, shoulder rises, neck gets tight. If I take a deep breath through my nose, you almost feel it goes down, which is your diaphragm talking to you, right? You can feel that thing going down. You feel your belly rise, and you should feel a horizontal breath in your rib cage. Okay, the concept that I want you to understand as you go through daily life right now is that your lungs have layers to it, and in the bottom layer of your lungs is where all of our oxygen-rich blood is, right? So when we're breathing low, when we're breathing through our nose throughout the longevity of a day, we're getting good blood, which is going to make you more aerobic, which that alone is going to make you feel calmer, right? And so people look at meditation if they need to really dial in super deep meditative practices. Realistically, if you can mechanically keep yourself sound and be a nasal breather throughout the course of a day, you will see changes in your life. You'll look better, you'll feel better, you'll have more energy, and more importantly, you speak to your brain in a really calm way. If my breathing gets triggered negatively, then the first thing that happens, if I go like that, if I get alarmed or I get right, if I start panting, sighing, if I add sound, mouth breathing, the trickle effect of that is that your brain goes into, is this a moment of uncertainty? Is this a moment of change? Is this a moment of attention? Is this too much of a struggle? And then you freeze, right? And that's where that, not necessarily starting with your mind, but you're recognizing your breathing. So build a relationship and a language with your breath so that you can understand your mind. And that is the highest competitive advantage that we can offer to people, right? So I want you to think of that first and foremost. Chest breathing is mouth, okay? Nasal breathing is low, okay? It's more of a belly breathe. Now, belly breathing, which is touched on a lot in yoga, which I like yoga, I'm terrible at it, I'm practicing it, but you can learn a lot through yoga. Yogis are geniuses when it comes to this stuff, and they're very fun to learn from. Now, where we touch on like belly breathing, the problem with that is that you could just be pushing out your belly, and we miss the entire capacity of basically getting your lungs opened up, getting your diaphragm down, opening up your lung capacity and your lung volume. So what we're going to do tonight is I want you to take your hands and I want you to clamp your rib cage together like you have these clamps, right? And you're going to clamp in your rib cage. Okay, I want you to clamp these in. Now as you breathe, you should feel a 360-degree angle going around. You should, if you're sitting in a chair, you should feel your back somewhat pushing into the back of the chair ever so slightly. You should see your rib cage going out wide, okay? And so we want to think of it as I'm pinching in, open them up, close them. Okay, allow your breath on the inhale to open up your hands, and then when you're going to help, you're going to guide your rib cage in on that exhale. Okay, and just keep working that strength, and feel your rib cage going horizontal, right? A vertical breath, we'll get into the depths of that, but sometimes when you see people belly breathing first, chest second, okay, they become very vertical, which is fine in some certain practices, but not overall life, right? We need to get horizontal with our breath. So first, take some of the stuff, and when you're walking, when you're sitting around the house, chime in with your mechanics. Am I breathing horizontal, and am I nasal breathing? And then the third part of that would be sound. Do I have quiet sound in my breath, right? There's an old ancient proverb, I believe, or a saying of the perfect breath is never seen. Okay, so keep your breath very still. And if you could think about your brain activity with the pace of your breath, they're pretty, if not all the way lined up. So if you're breathing very calm, very less movement, okay, you have saliva in your mouth, you're through your nose, you're humidifying the air, you're doing a lot of these health benefits, grabbing good oxygen. For the most part, your brain perceives things as safe, which means that you're using the right amount of energy and you're going to be able to push forward in life. So when you have these triggers that happen, you're going to be more aware. You're going to ask a better question. You're going to have a better answer, and then you're going to make a better choice, right? Because all of those triggers that I mentioned, there's no way around it. All of those are going to happen. They probably all happened at some point already today, okay? And we need to keep making better choices, creating new memories, and creating better library banks of memory, if you will, so that we can keep progressing. Because that's ultimately what we're doing as humans, is we need to keep progressing, and that's what evolution is, right? That's what adaptation is, and that's what we're doing in the moment. We're literally doing that as a human race, which I think is really cool to be a part of. So tonight, I just wanted to focus on mechanics. You can do that sitting up, you can do that laying down. If you lay down, have your feet up, okay, so your heels are on the ground, and sort of focus on that 360-degree full breath, and in trying to breathe a little bit less, right? For your homework assignment, I want you guys to just do a cadence breath, okay, which is going to be tapering your breathing from either 3 to 5 breaths a minute. Okay, you can do the math on that. Just execute 3 breaths a minute, 4 breaths a minute, or 5 breaths a minute. Or if you're a little bit shorter, or maybe you haven't practiced breath in that realm, have about a 6, 7, or 8 second breath in a minute. Sorry, I don't know if I said that right. Let me start that over. For a slow breath, look at it as 3 to 5 breaths total in a minute, not seconds. 3 to 5 breaths total. Or if that's too strugglesome or too stressful, look at it as having 6 to 8 breaths in a minute. Okay, and if you need that, just do one with a stopwatch and try to do 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. That would be 6, I believe. So do 6 total breaths in a minute and see if that's stressful. If that's not stressful, then stay there. If you can get a little bit more, go a little bit more. If it is stressful, then add counts to it. And practice that over the evening and try to do it through your nose. So I think that's good for the most part, right? I don't know what time it is. Okay, yeah, so we stayed in our time frame. The sun is just now going down. I'm going to enjoy this tea, which is hopefully cooled off by now, and have some dinner. I suggest you guys find some time to get creative with your people and have some reflection time and take some notes. I noticed we have some questions. I will look into those and I will reach out to you guys or however that works and help answer those. I don't want to take everyone's evening. For the most part, everyone kind of stayed locked in. So that's really cool. Hey, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what direction we're headed in. I hope this was able to add value to you. We will get more locked in with our content and we'll sort of design a process for that. We just wanted to get on tonight and do this, and just get used to it on our end too. I need to improve of talking to a screen, kind of narrowing it in, trying to figure some things out. But I really appreciate you guys being a part of this, and I know I got some texts from some of my really good friends across the country over the last hour or two. That's really special to me, and anything that I can do or MindStrong can do to help you or improve on our own end, let us know. And I hope everyone's being safe and learning things, and I've kind of talked on this a lot, but this is an amazing time in our lives to establish new skills, right? And to reflect on things and be still and progress. So learn how to learn, ask great questions, stay curious, and enjoy your guys' evening. Thank you very much.